This is a tutorial on how to use the TI-83 Plus to enter data and to look at a graph. So I have a table here, the number of erasers and the total cost in dollars. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to enter this data into the graphing calculator and see what the graph looks like. When you do that, if you know you're going to be entering data, then you want to first go to Stat Plot. So I push the second button and Y equals, and it brings me to this screen. And what this is telling me is all the plots are off. So I want to turn the plots on. I do that by hitting Enter. And I'm going to hit Enter again. So now it's blinking on. So I should be ready to hit Stat. And in Stat, I have these choices, and I'm going to go to Edit. So I can either push 1 or Enter. And now I'm going to enter in my data. So this L1 is going to be the X values, or the values on the X-axis, and the L2 will be the Y values. So you have to enter them in all at once. So you're going to do all of the L1s and then all the L2s. And you do this by pushing the number like 12 and then enter, 28 and enter, 60 and enter, 64 and enter. Now I'm going to go back up to the top by pushing the up arrow, and now go over, pushing the right arrow, so that I'm now under L2, and now I'm going to enter the other data the same way. And you can pause the video as you enter the data. So now I have the data entered, and now I'm going to push graph so I can see the data. But my graph is empty, and so that makes me think, well, why is that? Well, let's look at the data we have in our table. And I'm going to push the window button. Now, based on our window, it's saying the smallest value that will be graphed for X is -10, and the greatest value is +10. But if I look at the numbers in my table, all of these are bigger than 10, so that goes past my max. So I'm going to change this so that the minimum is 0, and the maximum is, I'm going to pick a number bigger than 64, so I'm going to choose 70. And if I'm going from 0 to 70, I probably don't want to go by 1s, so I'm going to go by 5s. And now I'm going to go over to my Y values and look and say, well, the minimum was -10 and the maximum is 10. So that means I would only see 3 and 7 because these would be past the max. So let me change that. I'm going to say a minimum of 0, and I'll make my maximum 20. That way it's bigger than 16. Okay, now I'm going to push graph and see what happens. Now, this is the first quadrant because this is 0, 0, and you can see that these points are all lined up. And they look like, if you were going to graph them, that they would make a straight line. Which makes us wonder, is this a situation that is proportional? So let's look at the data in our table. If we take the Y values and divide them by the X values, do we get the same constant? So let me go this. I see it's a calculator, so I can hit second, quit. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to take all of the Y values, each one in order, 3 divided by 12. So, and enter. And I'm going to do that with all of the Y values in my table and divide them by their corresponding X values. And what do I notice? Every time I take the 3, the total cost, and divide it by the number of erasers, and I write that as a ratio, I get the same ratio decimal, 0.25. So that number is the constant of proportionality. So I am going to use that constant and say this. if I multiply 12, what's 1/4 of 12? 3. What's 1/4 of 28? 7. And why am I saying 1/4? Because 0.25 is the same thing as a quarter, or 1/4. So it's a quarter of 60, 15. So here's my guess. I think that the equation is 0.25 times the x values, 0.25 times these numbers, 0.25 times the number of erasers is the total cost. And I'm going to push graph and see what happens. So since the line is going directly through those points, it tells me that the line I picked is the line that matches this data. Notice that it goes through the origin here, so it is proportional. So that's how you can use the graphing calculator to enter data into stats and confirm to see if it is proportional.